This is Eddie Nestor's Drive Time, weekdays from 5
on BBC London 94.9.
Good evening and welcome, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. This is Drive Time on BBC London 94.9, a specially extended Drive Time coming to you from Woolwich, where in May of this year we just stopped, every single one of us, and said, "You are kidding me." A man was driven into and hacked down on the streets of London, a serving soldier, and then another appeared to give a reason for doing it, some form of warped justification. His hands so bloody red it looked as though he had gloves on. That was shortly before he was shot by officers of the Metropolitan Police. Well, he and his accomplice were today found guilty of murder at the Old Bailey. We're taking full analysis here on the streets of Woolwich. We're talking to people on the phone, speaking to people who were here at the time, and we've invited lots of people out to speak to us. One of those is Asghar Bukhari from the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, giving his reaction to Lord John Reid, the former Home Secretary, who we spoke to just before the break. Let's talk, shall we, about radicalisation, about, intelligent young men, both these men, British men of Nigerian origin who were brought up as Christians, who were radicalised. But many other people have converted without this tragic outcome.
Look, this word radicalisation, I want all the people who are listening into it, the thinking of you, to understand it rather than, the kind of manufactured kind of fairy tales that we've been hearing, in my opinion, by politicians and some segments of the right-wing media. Look, when people, any human being, in this case it's Muslims, right, see day in, day out, the average kind of, English non-Muslim is more interested in other topics, but Muslims are acutely interested in what's happening in the Muslim world. When they see drone strikes, people getting killed, invasions, day after day via the internet, and they'll see these appalling images of families destroyed, children being killed, houses being bombed, that itself, that policy radicalises them. They don't need a hate preacher under the bed. They don't need, a magical book to tell them. It's none of that. They just need an unjust policy, and that radicalises human beings.
That our foreign policy, and drones are American, they're not British.
No, you have British drones.
But what we are told is where we go in, it is about saving lives. It is about intervention. It is not this, this 1990s idea of a kind of foreign policy that does alienate people and does radicalize some young people. So that isn't here and now. And if it was, then why are we talking about these two as being the exception as opposed to the rule?
As far as our foreign policy we're being told that it's about saving people. Yes, I accept that's what we're told. But as soon as you dig and do any research, all this books and books and books written on it. I don't know if I can mention some of the books, but there's hundreds of books written by British authors, British historians, and British intellectuals about our foreign policy that says that we are neck deep in backing dictators, torture around the world, kidnapping, and obviously illegal wars. Now, it depends where you fall.
None of that. None, and I know that's not what you're saying. But if this is a drive time show where people tune in all the time, none of that can possibly be a justification for what we saw on the streets of London.
Absolutely right. It's never a justification. There is no justification to take a human being's life. But we need to understand something to stop it, right? You can't stop anything in the world unless you have some understanding of it.
So how did he attempt you were in trial, how did he attempt to justify what he did in court?
Very, very clear in what he said is this. He said that I had nothing against the soldier. I killed him because he, to attempt, in his own words, he said, because it may stop the British government going and killing Muslims abroad. And in his own words, not my words, he said, it may save the soldiers, other soldiers going out and being killed when they go out there. So here's a man who does an evil act, but in his mind, he's justified.
Does that make him unwell?
In my opinion, no. It makes the Muslim leaders and the British government culpable of not teaching young, intelligent men that there was another way to change a policy that was flawed. And there's the crime, in my opinion. The politicians, are skillful in never mentioning that it's their policies, extreme policies, that create an extreme reaction. And Muslim leaders are skillful in coming in and condemning it and saying the right words and making everyone feel that they care. But in my opinion, Muslim leaders and the British government have failed to teach young, intelligent men that they could have made a change to British foreign policy peacefully using the democratic route. And because of their failure, young men like Lee Rigby have paid the price.
Let's go and have a listen to this. This is Michael Balajo's brother Jeremiah speaking to Al Jazeera, suggesting that the killing could actually be justified.
The events, to me, were inevitable. There was eventually going to be another attack which mentioned foreign policy as its justification. People are going to say that, well, he is a violent individual, and he proved that on the day of Woolwich. But I would say that was Lee Rigby a violent individual? Are other British soldiers who go to Afghanistan and Iraq and kill violent individuals? Is it justified for a Muslim to attack a member of an army that is occupying Muslim lands? This is something for the scholars, and I think it's obvious to most people. I suggest that it won't be the last, simply because of the tactics of the British Secret Service and foreign policy. It goes back to the statement, for every violent action is a violent reaction.
Asghar, do you have any sense as to how horrific, how offensive that will be, I imagine, to many of my listeners?
I have no doubt in my mind that many people will be offended, and many people will be shouting and screaming at the radio hearing that. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying that what he's saying is right. In fact, it's wrong. But one thing came out of what he was saying is that didn't come out the words of the politician that spoke earlier. Foreign policy. We can't deny it. And until we understand that and realise that that is the root of it, we will never, ever stop this.
Well, the other side of this particular coin would suggest to you that the foreign policy is indeed attempting to stop one Muslim from killing another Muslim. So because no matter how many people are being killed by Christians or however you might choose to describe them, sir, I'm sure you would accept that many Muslims are being killed by other Muslims.
Absolutely, but if it's unfair to say that. I've heard this so many times. But if you go back before Britain and France, and we could go back forever. But if we go back to before Britain and France divided and carved up the Muslim world into manufactured states, and this is the undoing of those states, you'll see the violence across the Muslim world happening because of the undoing of this Sykes-Picot agreement. It's unfair then to say that the kind of explosion and violent upheavals that are happening because of the states imposed on us and the strongmen imposed upon Muslims is Muslims fighting Muslims. This is the inevitable result of our flawed foreign policy since 1922.
Yes, guys, pleasure speaking to you. We'll do it again because I think this must be an ongoing conversation, regardless of whether people agree. Let us talk for fear of what happened on the 27th.